It all started with a rumble under my boots, a deep, angry vibration that ran through the soil like a warning growl. I was fixing the north fence of my property, a 1,000-acre ranch that had been in my family for 3 generations, when I felt it. My land stretched for miles, a mix of rugged hills, dense woods, and long, open pastures kissed by the golden Texas sun. It was more than land to me. It was legacy. So when that first rumble came, followed by the metallic screech of wheels and the blaring horn of a train, I knew something was terribly wrong. There shouldn't be any trains running across my land. I jogged over the rise near the tree line where I could see the southern edge of my property. What I saw there nearly made me drop the fence post in my hand. A full freight train, 20 cars long, was crawling across my southern fields like a snake made of steel and smoke. And right behind it, clear as day, a brand new set of tracks had been laid down without my knowledge or permission. My jaw clenched. I'd fought my share of battles over property lines, grazing rights, and water access. But this was something entirely new. I drove my truck down to where the tracks entered my land. A line of yellow flags marked the path. And to my shock, I saw a temporary construction shack right at the entry point. It was manned. I parked, stepped out, and approached the shack where a young guy in a reflective vest looked up from a clipboard. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, cheerful as could be. "Yeah, you can start by telling me why there's a train running across my land." He blinked, confused. "This right-of-way is part of the Lakeside HOA rail improvement project. Didn't they notify the landowners?" I stared at him, stunned. Lakeside HOA? That was the Homeowners Association that managed the upper half of the nearby gated community. A few years back, they started pushing their boundaries, buying up parcels of land around the lake, but they never had jurisdiction here, not even close. I'm not part of the HOA. This land's private. Always has been. You boys better get that train off my property and those tracks up by sundown." The guy backed up, suddenly nervous. I just work for the rail contractor. I'll call my supervisor." I turned and stormed back to my truck, my mind already spinning. I knew I had a legal fight on my hands, but something told me this wasn't a simple mistake. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. And when I got home, that suspicion turned into certainty. My mailbox held a certified letter from the HOA. It was dated 2 weeks prior and stated that they had, by emergency vote, approved the use of a historic easement that allegedly cut through my land. They claimed the original land records granted access to build and operate a short rail line for community logistics and emergency services. It was complete garbage. My grandfather had the entire land resurveyed and documented. In the 80s, there was no easement, no access, nothing. I called my lawyer that same night. Cynthia Franklin had handled our land dealings for 20 years. She was a pit bull with a law degree and a memory like a filing cabinet. "You say they ran a train across your land?" "Today. Like they owned the place. They picked the wrong rancher to mess with. I'll pull the deeds, the old plats, everything. We'll stop them cold." But Cynthia was cautious. If they're claiming historical easement, that means they're trying to muddy the waters. It might take a court to clear this up. I wasn't waiting on a court. That night, I rode the fence line near the tracks. I counted every spike, took pictures, recorded video. The train passed again, this time hauling concrete and lumber. It wasn't for emergency services. They were moving construction materials. I started digging deeper. The HOA board had changed hands a year ago. A woman named Carla Riggs had taken over as president. She had a background in real estate development, and from the looks of it, she wasn't managing the neighborhood, she was expanding it. Fast, public records showed she'd filed annexation paperwork with the county. She was attempting to extend the HOA's coverage to surrounding lands under the guise of environmental protection and infrastructure expansion. That included parts of my ranch. They didn't need my permission because they claimed historical usage. The next few weeks were a blur of confrontations, paperwork, and rising tension. I put up signs. Private property, no trespassing, no rail access. The HOA tore them down. I installed trail cameras. Someone smashed them. Every time I reported it to the sheriff, they told me it was a civil matter. They were trying to wear me down. But here's the thing about country folks. We don't scare easy, and we don't forget. So I started digging into my family's archives. My late uncle, a stickler for documentation, had stored boxes of land, records in the old barn attic. It took days, but I found it. The plat map from 1962, signed and sealed by the county surveyor, clearly showing no easement through the southern half of the property. And then I found gold. A letter dated 1974, from the county to my grandfather, rejecting a proposed rail access through our property because it would interfere with agricultural operations. The HOA's whole claim was based on a rail line that never got approved. I brought it all to Cynthia. She smiled when she saw it. "We're going to war." We filed suit, a cease and desist, a restraining order. We went straight for the jugular, but I didn't stop there. I took a page out of the HOA's book. While the legal wheels turned, I reached out to the adjacent landowners on the east side of my property. 3 families, all furious about the train. Turns out the tracks ran across part of their land, too. One of them, Old Man Graves, had a grudge going back years when the HOA fined his nephew out of the community for putting up solar panels. We formed an alliance. And with our signatures combined, we filed a motion with the county to rescind the HOA's annexation approval. We presented evidence, fraudulent maps, altered meeting minutes, and testimonies from former board members who quit over aggressive expansion tactics. That's when the media caught wind. Landowner battles HOA over illegal train route. Texas rancher fights back against HOA overreach. News vans showed up. Drone footage captured the train cutting across my property. The public was on our side. Carla Riggs made a statement. She doubled down, said the HOA had every right to use the land, and accused us of trying to sabotage community development. That was her mistake, because when people looked deeper, they found her company owned the rail contractor. She was profiting directly from the construction. The conflict of interest was front-page news. But the best part? The county commissioner, a man I once helped rescue his cattle during a flood, called me personally. "We're pulling their right-of-way, effective immediately." And just like that, one signature changed everything. I watched them tear up the tracks the next week. But the real cherry on top came a month later, when a court ruling found the HOA had knowingly falsified public documents to push the annexation. The court dissolved the HOA entirely, their charter revoked, their assets seized, and their officers banned from forming another board for 10 years. The train was gone, the land was quiet again. And I stood by my fence, boots in the dirt, watching the sun rise over my untouched field. This was my land. Always had been. Always will be. The first few days after the court order dissolving the HOA were nothing short of euphoric. Word spread like wildfire across the entire county. David had beaten Goliath. Neighbors who had once kept quiet were now honking in support as they passed my gate. Reporters camped on the nearby highway hoping for another angle, another comment. But for me, it was time to do what I had been waiting weeks for: repair the damage, restore my land, and protect it once and for all. The rail tracks were gone, torn up piece by piece by a crew hired by the county. They offered me a compensation check for the disruption and land degradation. I didn't want their money, but I took it. Not because I needed it, but because I had plans. Big ones. If the HOA thought I was just going to go back to ranching like nothing happened, they didn't know me very well. I called a meeting with the alliance we had formed, Old Man Graves, the McCulloughs, and the Cortez family. We met at my barn under the same beam where my grandfather once hung a lantern to guide lost travelers at night. That light, I told them, still meant something. It's time we make sure no one ever tries something like this again. We decided to form a landowners cooperative, a private council of ranchers, farmers, and longtime residents. Not a political entity, not a legal governance structure, but a union of voices, one that could stand against outside interference. We pooled money, shared legal resources, and created a digital land registry, backed up on private servers and in hard copy, stored in a fireproof vault in my office. Meanwhile, Cynthia worked with county officials to ensure the court's decision couldn't be reversed or manipulated. Carla Riggs had gone silent, her reputation in tatters. She was under investigation for fraud, misappropriation of funds, and corruption. One by one, the former HOA board members were called in to testify. Some spilled everything, others lawyered up. Either way, the truth was pouring out, and the community was eating it up. I wasn't done yet. There was still the matter of those who had backed the HOA's actions from behind the scenes. Developers, corporate interests, even a city council member was implicated in rubber stamping the expansion permits. That's when I knew this wasn't just about my ranch. It was about land rights across the entire region. So, I went public. With the help of Jared, the same YouTuber who had covered my case before, we launched a mini-documentary series titled Tracks of Deceit. In the series, we exposed the system that allowed this HOA to nearly steal land from lifelong owners. We showed the tactics, the false documents, the collusion, and people watched. Millions of them. Emails and letters poured in from across the country. People dealing with their own HOAs. People scared of what happened to me happening to them. I didn't just become a symbol, I became a rallying point. But my favorite moment? When the state attorney general called. We've reviewed the footage and the documentation your team submitted. Would you be willing to testify before the Legislative Ethics Committee? Gladly, I said. I testified twice that year. Each time I told the truth. Not as a politician or a lawyer, but as a man who had nearly lost everything because a few people thought a signature gave them control over what they didn't earn. Back home, life began to settle, but the changes remained. The cooperative grew. We now had over 50 landowners involved. A shared drone system monitored perimeter security across thousands of acres. We had legal workshops, a seed exchange program, and emergency services protocols stronger than anything the HOA ever built. One afternoon, Clara Cortez and her teenage son stopped by. She handed me a basket of fresh eggs and a thank you card. "You saved us all," she said simply. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who had been cornered and refused to back down. Someone who knew what his land meant and what legacy was supposed to look like. And that night, standing on my porch with a cup of strong coffee and a stronger heart, I realized something. They didn't just build tracks across my land. They built a path straight into their own undoing. And me? I built something that would last generations.